Bhagavad Bhakti-Rahi-Ki-Rai Ainanda-Tanura-Kinkara Hari-Rama Vishnu-Bhavamura Vipayat-Avatar-Pankata Vidaduri-Shadisham-Vishintaya Nayanaka-Sudhaya Vanam-Gad-Gad-Gudagira Ulakani-Sunava-Pukara Tavanama-Gane Bhavishri Vivaritam Vivena Chakshusha Vivarisavitam Shunyaitam Jagatsavam Govindam-Nivayena Asnishyava-Padanatam Vinasuma Adarsanam-Mahatam Garotuva Yadratava-Vidadhatavam Paro Malprana-Nathasya-Manapara Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years, and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benedictions to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have vested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by our holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no affection for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the stone in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the haze of my body stand on the head at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant with the world in my absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, who makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, who is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam ki jai, Shri Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Jai Jagadguru Shri Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.
you to spill today. Thank you. Everyone's seated before you start. You know it's not you that's making them seat. So, yeah, this is good stuff. Jaya Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tatoya Mudriyet Rastapres Adresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhakti Nishtiki. Today we're looking at Canto 10, Southern the Chapter 84, the sage's teachings of Kurukshetra, and we're at verse 52, I think, to 63. Okay. So, what I'll do is, I think we'll only do 52 in terms of speaking out, and then I will read out the translation for the other ones. So 52, so 1084, 52. Atal vibhyo dadat kale yatha nadatam sadaksina svahalam kripyo lam kriyata Gobu Kanya Mahadana Athara Vipigyo Dadakale Yatha Mantatam Sadaksina Sadam Kripyo Lampyatya Gobu Kanya Mahadana
Vigyo dadakale Yathanatam sadakshina Swalam kritbhyo lam kritya Gobu kanya mahadana To the priests, Adadat, gave, Gale, at the appropriate time, Yatha Amnatam, as stipulated in the scriptures, Sa, He, Dakshina, gift of thanks, Su Alankritibhya, who were richly adorned, Alankritya, decorating them even more elaborately. Gold, cows, bull, land, kanya, and marriageable girls. Maha, greatly, dana, valuable. Then, at the appropriate time, according to the scriptures, Vasudeva remunerated the priests
by decorating them with precious ornaments, though they were already richly adorned, and offering them valuable gifts of cows, land, and marriageable girls. Okay. There's no purport on this, so I'll just do the translation one more time. Quite important. Then at the appropriate time, according to scripture, Vasudeva remunerated the priests by decorating them with precious ornaments that they were already richly adorned, and offering them valuable gifts of cows, land, and marriageable girls. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to read out the next few, and I'll go back to this one in a moment, okay? After supervising the Patni Sandhya and Vibhajya ritual, the great Brahmana sages bathed in Lord Parshuram's lake with the sponsor of sacrifice, Vasudeva, who led them. Yeah? His sacred bath complete, Vasudeva joined with his wives in giving jewelry and clothes and then wearing to the professional reciters. Vasudeva then put on new garments, after which he honoured all classes of people by feeding everyone, even the dogs. With opulent gifts, he honoured his relatives, including all their wives and children, the royalty of the Dharma, Kosala, Kuru, Kesi, Keska, and Skunja kingdoms, the officiating members of the assembly, and also the priests, witnessing demigods, human spirits, forefathers, and channels. Then, taking permission from Lord Krishna, the shelter of the goddess of fortune, the various guests departed, as they all chanted the glories of Vasudeva's sacrifice. Okay. So, you heard the last word, sacrifice. Very important word. So what is going on here? Why is this business so interesting to us? With Vasudeva giving money to those who already have a lot of money. They're already rich. Why does he give them lots of money? So this is what we need to try and understand in order to progress ourselves. Okay, I'm just going to put something on the screen. Krishna, in this chapter, is very much interested in carrying out one of the purposes of his arrival upon the earth. Okay. That works? Yeah, okay. So we know from chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita. Chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, verses 4.6 to 4.8. We know why Krishna descends upon the earth. Okay, we know why this is. He wants to deliver the pious, and he wants to annihilate the miscreants. Okay. And he wants to re-establish the principles of religion. Yes, don't. Yeah. Not supermarket discount vouchers. That's what you were thinking. That's not what he's here for. Right? So, within this framework, you have to ask, why? I mean, you're God. Why do you have to come to earth? Right? Why? And sort of start messing around and doing all sorts of things. I mean, Earth is a very interesting place. So why does he come here? Okay. So the first thing is that every living entity even those in ISKCON Adelaide are very dear to the Lord. Okay. So we have to remember that. Dear to the Lord. Okay. And the Lord is very much aggrieved that living entities are not playing with the Lord in the spiritual world. Okay? So, aggrieved Lord, we are not playing with the Lord. Okay? So the Lord is much more keen for us to go back to the Lord than we are to go back to Him. Okay? He's much more keen. He wants us to go back to Him all the time. So, in the Christian tradition, you have the parable of the prodigal son. You may have heard of this. So, there's the father, there's the sun. Get the right spot and correcting everything. There we go. Yeah. And the son goes, "There, I don't like your rules in your house, Father, so I'm going to go off and spend some time messing around in the world." Okay, so he leaves the house, goes into the world, and after a while, he finds the world isn't very nice, so then he returns to the Father. That's the Christian tradition. And the idea is that you left abandoned God, you go away, you think the world isn't a very good place, you come back to your Father's house. But in the Vedic tradition, particularly in the Bhakti tradition, that's not how God operates. Okay, God is the Father that once the Son isn't in the world messing around, is trying to constantly create situations where the Son can find the road back home. He's proactive. He's not inactive. Okay, so Krishna is a proactive God. Okay. So he has to create situations which allow you to start to remember Krishna. Okay? So there's various agencies that work to do this. Oh, what's happening here? Forgive me. The technology there is not working. Is it working okay? Okay. Yeah. So agencies. So the agencies that Krishna has are the material energy. Okay. Okay. And within the material energies are dynamics which are assisting him in getting you back to him. Okay. So these energies are forgetfulness, which is under Krishna's control. There's false ego, which is the ability to enjoy separately from God. Without that, you can't enjoy separately from God unless God allows it. It's not the case that you can just enjoy separately from God on your own volition. You need God's assistance to do that in the Bhakti tradition, right? So if you want to do sense gratification, the Lord has allowed you to do sense gratification. It's not like you're here playing God and able to do that on your own. It doesn't work like that. Okay? So forgetfulness. Then you've got, this is terrible, okay. The pencil cost me $400, so I'm very disappointed. It's not working very well. It's forgetfulness, and then you've got karma, okay, and which means the reactions of your actions. Okay. And then you get placed, the sun gets placed into a material body. Okay? So we have the illusion of permanence of the temporary. Okay? Temporary body, we associate that with permanence. Because Krishna has put the energy of ignorance in the material world. Okay? Without the energy of ignorance, avidya, we cannot associate with this temporary thing. We'll think it's a hallucination. But we're not ready to accept that it's not a hallucination, so that video exists. Okay? It's going to come on to something very important I'm going to talk about. I just want to lay out these fundamental, very basic points that most of you are aware of. Okay. I'm going to have to give up on this now. Okay, this isn't working. Okay. So, the point is that once we're here, how do we get out of here? Right? That's the point. And what he has to do is sometimes, because people here are so deluded, and there's such a state of ignorance, that he himself has to come and create what's called the system of yajna, the system of sacrifice. Okay? And chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, this is outlined very well. Yeah, chapter 3 and chapter 4. That every action that we do here really has to be an action that has to get us out of here. Okay? And the way we do that is we come to an understanding this body is the energy of the Lord to be used for the Lord. Okay? So there's two paths before us in every single moment. Do we enjoy for ourselves, or do we do something to serve the Lord? There's the two choices open to us. Okay? So for a lot of people, when they wake up in the morning, the idea is, yippee, here's another day I can go and have a drink in the bar, go to work, get some money, buy a Rolex and enjoy myself, right? But for the Bhakti Yoga practitioner, a day is an opportunity to show more love to God. It's a day opportunity for service. Okay, so there are two different things. In every given moment, you have that choice. Okay? And in the material world, choosing the Lord is called yajna, called sacrifice. Okay? Because here, we have to give up the propensity to enjoy for ourselves, to progress back. In the spiritual world, there's no such concept of yajna, really. It doesn't exist in that sense. Okay? Because there's no need for us to stop material enjoyment, because material enjoyment doesn't exist in the spiritual world. Okay? So Krishna has to create a system by which those living entities who have started to have enough of being here can undertake an action which is yajna. Okay? They have to start to act in sacrifice. Those opportunities have to become open to them. And that is the purpose of all religion, irrespective of whether it's Islam, Buddhism, or whatever it is. Okay? At the most basic level, putting religion on one side, the most simple form of yajna is some sacrifice of self-interest for some bigger system. A family life. Okay? Now that can be whether you're a Gramadi or a Grihastha. You're sacrificing your own interest for the welfare of somebody else. When you start sacrificing for your family, not out of self-gratification, but because you want your family to do something better, like, for example, go out there and do some community work, that is a system of sacrifice that's approved by Krishna. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, acts of sacrifice should never be given up. They purify even the great souls. Okay? Because the entire system of exit in the material world is based on sacrifice. Is yajna. So what we have to learn is what is yajna and what is not yajna. Or in other words, what is correct action and what is incorrect action. In order to elevate ourselves. So, in the most basic sense, as I said, yajna means to not enjoy for oneself. But enjoying for oneself exists on two levels. It can exist on a very physical level, and it can exist on a subtle level. Okay? On a subtle level, we want to enjoy it for ourselves by having things which are not tangible objects. Adulation is, for example, a subtle form of sense object. I want to be revered for what I do. I want to be recognized for my service. I want to be known for the good work I do in my community. Okay? So, in both the non-religious system and the religious system, there's an intricate relationship between subtle desire and yajna, action and sacrifice. Okay? So there will be pure action and sacrifice, and there will be mixed action and sacrifice. Mixed action and sacrifice is action where there is tinges of self-interest. It's still yajna, but the interest is something in return for oneself. Okay? I give a class because I want to be recognized as a speaker. Right? That is wanting something in return. But it's still sacrifice. Krishna still regards it as good action. But the purpose, the end game is, Krishna says in chapter 4, verse 19, that the person whose every action is devoid of sense gratification is in perfect knowledge. Okay? And what that means is the one who can recognize where his action has desire in it. That is the key. Okay? You have to know when you're being selfish. And in order to know that, you have to have a much more refined definition of selfishness than a normal human being out there. Okay? For the average Joe in the world, selfishness is, well, I'm not that selfish, I do something for my dog, or I do something for my neighbour, or I do something for my local community sector, or whatever it is. Right? But the bhakti tradition, specifically the achievement of pure bhakti, is sacrifice not just for non-self-interest, but total sacrifice of every action for the Lord's pleasure. Okay? So what I was going to draw off the pennon work is a system that starts at one end, where you're giving up for some self-interest, some yajna. Then you have a system of charity work where there's not little wanted in return. Then you have religious activity where you may want something in return, you may not want something in return. And as you progress up that yoga ladder, you're trying to reach a point where what you really want to do is only act for the Lord's pleasure. Therefore, every motivation you have is deeply questioned. This is an inner journey. A bodybuilder has an external journey of what the body looks like. We have an inner journey of what the mind looks like. What is the quality of our consciousness pertaining to our actions? That is what the Lord is seeing from the heart. Okay? Why is it that we do what we do every moment? Is a very important question in Bhakti Yoga. What do I want to achieve is not an important question. Right? At the end of Bhagavad Gita, there is a momentary pause, chapter 18, verse 63. But Arjuna is taking in the entire Bhagavad Gita. And just as he's breathing in deeply and taking in the entire Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to him, all right, you're thinking about it, I'm going to give you the biggest secret of all secrets. Okay? And then he gives in chapter 18, verse 66, abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. I will deliver you from all fear. We take that phrase too literally, I will deliver you from all fear. What it actually means theologically is, I am the source of all pleasure. Don't worry about the fear of losing out of pleasure by doing other things which are not related to me. Seek your pleasure from me. Do not fear. You're still going to be happy. Please me and all your happiness will come. You don't need to look anywhere else. So we're very much like this prodigal son that's going out into the world looking for pleasure. That's really what we're doing. And what we've done is, by our search for looking for pleasure independent of God, we've got very, very lost. And the problem with getting very, very lost is we start developing unwanted attributes that block our development of love of God. Yeah? For somebody who has no independence and no separation from Krishna in his intentions, okay, there is no idea of false ego. It's just the ego of the soul in its natural state. But as soon as we want to enjoy separately, in any given moment, okay, we're moving away from the Lord. So the motivation of action is very, very, very important. Okay? If you remember, when I last spoke on this chapter, bear with me, I showed a picture. Anatoly will remember this. Okay? And I'll just bring it up. You remember this eye test I brought up last time I gave a talk on this chapter, okay? Now, with spiritual vision and understanding of karma, when you look at the eye test, which is the valley on the left, okay, what you are seeing is souls that have chosen to enjoy separately from God. It is a diseased condition. That's what you're seeing. For a materialist, that's a beautiful view because they want to be here, they want to enjoy this world. They want to enjoy the eyes themselves. But for the spiritualist, that is a deeply concerning picture. And one that should evoke huge amounts of compassion. Okay? When one sees a plant, or a tree, or a dog, that is a horrible condition for the living entity to be in. The living entity is supposed to be enjoying its service to God. It's not supposed to be a plant, or a tree, or a dog. Okay? Neither are any of us supposed to be in these bodies. Okay? We are in a diseased condition. We are trying to get out of a diseased condition. Okay? And in order to get out of a diseased condition, we have to practice the two important things that we're told in Bhagavad Gita, which is detachment and suitable practice from the objects of sense gratification. Okay? Only with practice can we understand what it is in the world that's getting us involved in the world. Okay? What is the source of my pleasure? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll run through the slide because it's the same points on this chapter, on the same chapter. So that's us today. Okay? So as you remember that Vasudeva here is acting within the system of sacrifice. Okay? The reason he's giving money to people that are already wealthy is because he, as a devotee, is setting an example to the rest of humanity. Even though they're wealthy, even though I'm wealthy, I am not the proprietor of this wealth. It belongs to God. And God correctly wants us to give in charity, to show we're not the proprietors. Okay? That's the knowledge behind charitable work. This idea of detachment and then learning that you're not the owner of what you're giving away. Okay? And it is that which is the mercy that is shown by the devotee on living entities in human form. Okay? So we have to set an example by our own actions of how to behave in a way that pleases the Lord. The Lord is sitting in our own hearts, witnessing everything we do. So we should not put on a bad show for the Lord. He's all cognizant, all aware of all our desires and intentions. So we want to purify our desires because the Lord is constantly aware and also enjoying and not enjoying what we are feeling and desiring, depending on what we are feeling and desiring. Okay? There is no need to upset anyone in this world. Right? Because it pleases Krishna. At the same time, there is a reason to upset people in the world, like Duryodhana, by killing them in the Battle of Kurukshetra, because it pleases Krishna. So the motivation behind both things is what is pleasing Krishna. For one has no separate interest from that of the Lord. The only interest is to please the Lord. Okay? So we talked about this kind of conduct last time I was here. Conduct that would please the Lord. Knowing our own nature is very important for this. Okay? For us, oh my God, that was I was offended by that. But we also have to have a view on whether that was offensive or not. And why it was offensive and why am I reacting like that? Is it my ego that's reacting to the situation? If it's my ego, then that's one of the things that keeps me in the material world. So I have to be very, very aware of that and not react. Yeah, that's detachment. You have to know yourself. It's very important. We're all different. We all have our own problems. If we didn't, we wouldn't be in the material world. We all have different subtle and physical desires that infiltrate our minds, that have come from millions of births. But we must learn to identify them and not identify with them. You could be lusty, that could be something that goes through your head. But you have to realise you're the soul and not the body or the mind or the intelligence where this lust lives. You have to detach the reality from the illusion. Okay. The other idea of separateness, there's two ideas of separateness we've talked about. The first idea is separate desires for the Lord. The other idea of separateness is thinking any other living entity is separate from the Lord. The Lord is in the heart of every living entity. Okay? So they say that spiritual life begins, real spiritual life begins, when one finally understands that everyone else around them is also a part of God. I don't mean theoretically understand that. That's jnana. I mean vijnana. Act in the way that shows an understanding in the heart that that's the case. Yeah. We saw the Sistastika at the start. No matter how horrible someone is to me, I will still love them. Because the spiritual vision is that person is a part of Krishna and they're only in a diseased state. There is no need to feel anger or be upset or take it personally or have an egotistical reaction. We're all part of Krishna. Krishna lives in all of us. As individual souls, we are his parts. Let us relish each other for that. Let us love and serve each other for that. Let us not see the differences of the material world. This is this covering and that is a different covering. Within these covering, within these clothes, we exist. Let us not think that we're these clothes. Some of our clothes have holes in them, these bodies. Some of them are deformed, some of them react aggressively, some of them react passively, some of them are lazy, some of them are sad. They're all different clothing covering the soul. Okay? Do not identify with that person's clothing. Right? I said this before, I don't think Pradeep is that shirt. That would be very, very stupid. Okay? I don't think, oh well, that person, Rasaraj is egotistical or whatever, because that's not Rasaraj. That's just a covering for millions of births. Yeah? We don't judge because we know that we can't be perfect, because if we were perfect, we wouldn't be here. Right? We just wouldn't be here in the first place. So, sacrifice is our way out. And understanding what we have to give up is our way out. Now, to accelerate the process of yajna, you sacrifice where you know you have your material propensities. That's when you do the sacrifice. Okay? If I'm a billionaire and I give $1,000 a week to the temple, it's not really much of a sacrifice. Okay? For each of us, it's different. What do we enjoy of this world the most that we're a little bit reluctant to give to Krishna? For a lot of us, it might be time. But that is where we have to make the sacrifice. Because that is where that sacrifice becomes an austerity. And austerity is more purifying than just a sacrifice, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Right? Yeah. Whatever you give away, whatever you do for me. Okay. So the elevation of desire through sacrifice, the stopping of separation, thinking that I am separate from the Lord or anybody else is separate from the Lord. If I'm not separate from the Lord, how can anybody else be separate from the Lord? If my interests should be separate from the Lord, then their interests should not be separate from the Lord's. How can I encourage that? That's what's going to please the Lord. Okay? Now, what Prabhupada understood was very, very profound. Okay? And this is where we have to look at the gold standard. Okay? In Canto 2 of Bhagavatam, he makes it very, very clear, particularly the first few chapters, that the material world was designed as a reformist prison for the conditioned souls. Okay? So Krishna wants everyone to get out of here. That is Krishna's desire. So it's very easy to align yourself with Krishna's desire, because all you have to do is help everyone get out of it. Prabhupada saw that very clearly. That's why he jumped on the ship and went to New York with almost no money. In the freezing cold, he wandered around New York. Okay? We have this, from films of Prabhupada, we have this vision that this was some sort of desperate act of great austerity, and he was going from here to there. And in some ways, on a material level, it was. But another way to look at Prabhupada is to think about, if you think about all the rock stars, and all the film stars, and all the billionaires that you've ever heard of in the last 100 years, who was the happiest soul? Now, if happiness only comes from having your own desires completely aligned with Krishna's, who was the happiest person in the last 100 years? And if we understand that, and all we really want to be is happy, and all we have to do is follow Prabhupada. Look at him closely and follow what he does. The idea of surrender unto me, abandon all varieties of religion, do not fear, is abandon all forms of things that you think will make you happy, and come to me, because the only way you're really going to be happy is if your interests align with me. And the example is given by Prabhupada. If you want mercy, give mercy. Show them a picture of Krishna for 1 second. Give them a book even if they're thrown away later. Right? That is complete alignment of your interest with the Lord's interest. In that spirit of life, there is no scope for selfish interest. You can't say that Prabhupada was selfish. You can't say that. But in some ways, he was extremely selfish. He knew where real happiness was. He knew what he was. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, happiness and distress are an illusion. Because we don't know what they are. That's why Arjuna can understand. It doesn't matter if I feel happiness or distress. Because that's not who I am. I'm not this dress. I'm not this body. That's a temporary thing I'm feeling. I felt unhappiness in my last life. I had a problem with my wife or husband in my last life, and probably a few lives before that. What's so important about this one? Because I'm seeking what the Lord wants. I am an agent of the Lord. I have nothing more, nothing less. And that is very, very glorious. Be careful of separation. Separation of interest creates rebirth. Birth, death, or disease. Follow Prabhupada's example. Have no separation of interest. What is there in anxiety? Why do you need to be anxious if you have no separation of interest? You're only anxious because your interest is separated from Krishna's. Right? Yes, you're anxious to serve the Lord and make him happy. That's different. That's spiritual. But the material level, there's no anxiety really. Right? We're all here, we're getting an opportunity to serve, which is very glorious. Yeah? We're all carrying out these glorious activities in Lord Chaitanya's pastime of ISKCON. You know? So let's not be miserly. The reason at the start of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, give up this miserly weakness, is Arjuna, you're intelligent. You know all action is for sacrifice. Because all action is supposed to lead to me eventually. So why are you being a miser and going off in the forest? And sitting there doing nothing. No, fight the war for me. That's bhakti. Okay? The purport to chapter 11, verse 55. Krishna makes it very clear. Prabhupada makes it very clear. The billionaire who has a factory but runs the factory for Krishna is in bhakti yoga. He's not in karma yoga. Because the only reason he's running the factory is to please the Lord. Everything he has, he uses it for the Lord. It's because we're tainted with laziness and inactivity that we have this fake idea of renunciation. Arjuna is an illusion. He goes to the forest because he has a fake understanding of detachment and renunciation. We cannot give this up because it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God, He's given it to us. There's no scope of renunciation in the real sense. Renunciation is just younger for the Lord. If I'm a poet and I go and sit in the forest and chant all day, only God has given me the gift of being a poet. If God is not a poet, I cannot be a poet. If God cannot run fast, I cannot run fast. There is nothing that exists here that can exist without it being in Krishna. So Krishna must have given me those abilities. They're not mine, I must use them for the Lord, because there is no separation of interest between myself and Krishna. My only interest is that Krishna is happy. That's the only interest I have. And once that is absorbed, you're free. There is no stress. Life is a walk in the park, once you understand that. Karma just comes and bounces off like bullets. Yeah. My car's stolen, my house is burnt down, whatever happens. This is Krishna. This is Krishna I play. Play with Krishna. Just smile. Okay? If he's doing that, you're aligned with his interest, there's nothing to be sad about. Nothing to be sad about. Okay. Now that everyone's asleep, I can leave without everyone noticing. There's the old joke in the Bhaktivedanta manner. Every night every day the brahmachari gets 7 hours sleep, 6 at night and 1 in the Bhagavatam class. Right, any questions, corrections? I'm sure there's millions, and then we can just have a discussion. Please feel free to engage. Mataji.
Just for my clarification, since there's no purport for the verses that we read, I just wanted to know if you could share how you approach teaching them in a way that stays faithful to Srila Prabhupada and avoids mental speculation.
Okay. So, what you have to understand is the overall score of this chapter. So the methodology of approaching this chapter is as follows. I'm just going to turn this off. I'm distracted. Photographs. Okay, so when we interpret texts, thank God, Krishna's mercy, I did a PhD in interpreting texts. That helps to a degree. You look at the context, right? So what I did last night was I looked at what the context of the chapter is. Okay? So I took a photograph. This is the start of the chapter, and I read the preamble of the chapter. It's like an international treaty, you read the purpose of the legislation. Okay? So Krishna is upon the earth. So what is Krishna? Why does Krishna, as I said at the start, why does Krishna have to come to the earth? Why is all this happening? So you have to ask the question why. That's the reason. What is going on here? Right? Yes, at one level we can read it as a story. Krishna's here, some things are happening in the battlefield, some things are going, the saints are doing something, his father's doing something, and everyone lives happily ever after. And that can be read as a story. But if the Lord is here, the Lord only comes because he wants to facilitate us getting out of here. Right? That's the reason he's here. So what is it in this story that tells us what the Lord's purpose is? Okay. Why is the Bhagavatam emphasizing the word sacrifice? Yeah. Now we understand Bhagavad Gita, first 6 chapters, which is all about the importance of sacrifice. We know our Bhagavad Gita understanding is a backbone to our Bhagavatam understanding. Right? That's why we learn Bhagavad Gita first, and we then go to Bhagavatam. Okay. So Krishna's activities here are those, he's always setting an example for the conditioned souls. Right? Every time disorder occurs, Krishna reappears. Because the world needs to be reminded that ultimately he's in charge. At the end of Kali Yuga, when the atheists are running amok and the demons are everywhere, Krishna has to reappear because the whole system is messed up. He has created the system to facilitate us going back. If you look at Prabhupada's mission in a simple, basic way, He just wants everyone to go back to Krishna. That's part of the mission. Right? So we interpret these texts purposefully, teleologically, as it's called in social science. We're looking at the purpose behind the text. The purpose behind the text is what is our conduct. How should our conduct reflect Vasudeva? So when we walk out of here, what we have to think is, if Vasudeva, a pure devotee, is showing yajna as being so important, yes, he's giving different levels of sacrifice here, giving money to the wealthy in charity, giving cows to the priests, right? Because in Varnashram, the top is the bottom in yajna. That's the system of Varnashram, Varnas, I say specifically. The Brahmins and the Kshatriyas lead the lower classes to sacrifice. Yeah? And that is the example being set. Yeah?
I'm still not understanding how he stays faithful to Prabhupada's purports. I'm not understanding how you describe it.
Right, well, you have to understand the purpose behind the purports to get that. It's the purpose behind the purports.
Prabhupada understood the purports, and that's why he gave them to us. I'm just asking, I've never seen this before, Prabhu. In all of the 6 years I have attended classes in ISKCON, I've never seen one speaker speak on a class that didn't have a purport. So I'm trying to understand this, that's all. I just want clarification on that.
Yeah, but you have all the purports beforehand, which are telling you what the context is.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah.
The context, yes. But what I'm saying is I've never seen a speaker do this before, so I don't understand. I mean, I'm very new to ISKCON, 6 years only, okay? I attend classes every day, but I've never seen this before. So I'm just trying to make sense of this.
Yes, and I can explain what I can explain. So what I'm saying to you is the basic method. There's a book that's just come out, Bhakti Vikas Swami, on Buddha Mission of Prabhupada. Okay? Now, they're quite big books, don't expect everyone to read them. But certainly the first quarter of those texts explain what Prabhupada's aims are. Okay? His textual aims. So when we're interpreting Charles Dickens, or when we're interpreting Latin texts, what we do is we understand what the author intended. That's what we have to understand of that, a common understanding of that. So, to give you an example, when we're teaching law, for example, protection of children, legislation will have
I'm just trying to understand what the difference between interpretation and mental speculation is in this context. When we're teaching Prabhupada's teachings, I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, so the problem is that you're giving two very broad definitions of two things, okay? So what mental speculation is to one person, to another person is different. But speculation simply is, for example, I speculate that the moon is 47 kilometers away from the Earth. Right? That's speculation, I guess that. Okay? So, for me to kind of go beyond speculation to reality, I have to look at what the scientists think about that. So I use reference points. Right? So what I'm saying to you is to understand what's going on and not to be speculation, you need a point of reference. And the obvious point of reference is whether you're consistent within other writings of Prabhupada. And the way to understand that is look at writings on the mood and mission of Prabhupada, because that will tell you what Prabhupada's interpretation of his texts are, and what he's trying to achieve. And therefore, your reading of the text therefore becomes not speculative, but based on some rational basis.
But then shouldn't there be more references to what Srila Prabhupada said, so that you can kind of link what you're saying to Prabhupada's verses? That would make more cohesiveness for the layperson like me to be able to understand how it relates.
Yeah, but what we're doing is we're dealing with macro concepts at the moment. So we're dealing with what are the core concepts behind these texts. That's what we're trying to explain. That's why we're looking at concepts in a macro way, like we're not this body. What is the soul? What is the purpose of the soul? Why does the system of yajna exist? Why was the material world created? These are creating a context for us to then interpret what's going on. That's why we discuss the macro concepts. Right? Now, in a very, very academic class, you might look at one of these texts and look at one or two of the Sanskrit words like you do on Bhakti Vaibhav or one of the advanced courses. And then you textually break that apart. But for a generic audience of different backgrounds, my view is the best way to approach this is the macro concept level and iterate those macro concepts, because that's what's required for the bulk of the ISKCON congregations I've come across. Yeah.
Just to give you context, when Mahavishnu Maharaj is here, he categorically said we have to read a verse which is a purport. And the reason for that he said was you are not qualified to comment on something where somebody is not commented. The Prabhupada is a commented, or his disciples are commented. So we have to select a verse which has a purport and then elaborate on it. So he was telling us, all of us, in fact he chastised us, because we chose a word which had no purport. He chastised all of us and he said, please next time choose a word that has a purport and then explain. Just for the context.
Yeah, I think that's generally not bad advice. And two practical problems with that advice are as obviously as follows. Firstly, the purport itself can be esoteric. So that's the first problem you run into with that approach. I had a discussion about this on Vaibhav course. So, if we look at the previous purport, we'll see that it talks about Yojisma, Darsha, Pranasama, Prakrita, Yagnas, and so on, right? But what I've spoken about is Yagna, which is in the previous purport. Okay? So this is a series of narrations of that purport. The other difficulty we have is we mustn't take what fits one person, one context, and make it a generic rule, right? And that's one of the things that we see problems with Prabhupada's instructions. Somebody gives an instruction and it turns into a general rule for everybody else. We must be very careful with that. So, I take the point. I feel that in certain instances, going beyond the purport of the text would obviously destroy the purpose of the text. That's always the case. But we haven't gone there today. Any other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to check, in the first verse, 52, it mentioned about Vasudeva is giving gifts to the priest, like cows, manageable girls. And then the other verse was about sacrifice, which you emphasized on. So is this a sacrifice, and how can he give manageable girls to priests?
Again, what's a priest?
Manageable girls to the priest. So was that a gift or a sacrifice?
What did he give? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Vasudeva was giving manageable girls to the priest as a gift.
Marriageable girls.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the.
So how do we understand as?
Okay, so that is still yagna. It's a two-level form of yagna. So marriage itself is a form of yagna, right? So the idea of marriage itself has been promoted because that's a sacrifice. People go from having illicit relations and sexual activities to having a marriage, which is grihastha ashram, hopefully. So that's a form of sacrifice, that's self-gratification. And also the giving of the girls itself is sacrifice. Charity is sacrifice. So there's two levels going on there. Yeah.
How can we understand that is the same thing? Because there's no purpose, so we won't understand that.
Yeah, but you have to read very, very carefully what's going on here. You have to read the text very carefully. If you look at the text of this chapter, the word yagna, I haven't AI'd it, put in AI, but the word yagna comes up constantly, right? And Krishna is generally, when we are talking about pastimes where giving occurs in large quantities, those are to do with the system of sacrifice as outlined in chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so commentators on Bhagavatam are consistent about that. So, unlike what Rashdalav says, you don't have to have a purport for that. That's a common understanding of what's happening in the Bhagavatam. Okay? And you can either accept that or you can disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing. That's just debate. Yeah. But this chapter is definitely about yagna. 100%. Even if the word yagna wasn't used, which it used many, many times, that's what it's about. It's about elevation through the right conduct. And the basis of yajna, the very basic thing about yajna is, I'm not doing something selfish. If we grasp that and apply it to our lives, we've got the benefit of it. If we're speculating on how do I know what the purport says, or whether I should go to the purport or not, we've missed the point. That's mental exercise, that's on the bodily level. What we're trying to do is turn jnana into action, which is what is Krishna trying to tell us to do. What is he trying to tell us by this chapter? Yeah, which what he's saying is don't be selfish. Align your interests with mine. That's the purpose of all the activities here. You know? These people gradually elevate themselves birth after birth to doing sacrificial acts. So eventually they can come to the Lord. Okay? Now, it's up to Krishna whether somebody understands it that way or not. That's a matter of Krishna. Because Krishna ultimately determines what you understand and don't understand. Because he's controlling the covering over you. You are actually completely knowledgeable as a soul. You've just been covered up in different ways. And as you surrender to the Lord, he uncovers that covering. Yeah? So I can make a point here, no one can understand it. Maybe I don't understand it. I can be reading it out, I can read out the purple, I don't understand it, no one understands it, we just nod. Yes?
When king does charity to Brahmanas, reason for it, Brahmanas by quality, they don't own anything. Whatever they get, cows and jewelry and what they give back to society, because one, they are in knowledge and they are not attached to anything. So when, so this Prabhupada explains in Bhagavatam that Brahmanas specifically people, they give back to society. They don't own anything. So even from that background, manageable friends, all of them, they don't get married. But because they are not, they are Krishna conscious and they are responsible to make the society Krishna conscious. They will ensure these girls are married in such a manner that they are protected and they are Krishna. So end of the day, when kings do that, it's not for, if you see every single chapter where there is a charity given to Brahmanas, there's a cow, there is expensive clothing, silk clothing, and there is jewelry and all that, they don't hold anything to use. Then they defeat the purpose of the Brahmana. They give it back. But they do it with proper knowledge and they know where to give it. So marriageable girls will be given to those people who are Krishna conscious. And so the girls are free.
That's a very good point. That's exactly what's going on. But that doesn't mean that we are Brahmins by nature. So we have to be careful as well. We can't act like Brahmins as well. In that sense, because our nature is like that. You know? Yeah. A very good point, thank you. Anything else? So everyone's agreed this is about sacrifice? Have I sacrificed myself enough here in this fire of I don't want to use the word argumentativeness, that's probably go there, but I'll probably create the confusion myself. Right. Should we find this out? Yeah.